Carl Jung's most disturbing discovery was not the shadow nor the anima, but the simple, cold fact that purpose itself is a volatile, self-consuming energy. You came here because nothing brings you joy anymore. The things you used to love, that film, that trip, that hobby, feel like faded replicas of an emotion you can no longer access. The world looks flat. The colors have been desaturated. You feel like a ghost in your own routine. And here is the psychological paradox of your suffering. You are not broken, you are simply too awake. Jung identified this specific malaise as a signature symptom of a consciousness that has outgrown its container. You are experiencing what I call the hedonic ceiling effect, a neurological and psychic state where the baseline stimulus required to generate a positive emotional response has become impossibly high. We are told by modern culture that joy is external, that it is a consequence of acquisition, a better job, a new partner, or a different city. Yet you have climbed those ladders, and the view from the top is only a wider vista of emptiness. This isn't a failure of morality or effort. It's a profound, inevitable collision between a deeply evolved mind and a fundamentally simplistic world. Modern neuroscience validates this ancient Jungian truth. When you experience a high-reward stimulus, a promotion, a great meal, a thrilling new experience, your brain releases a surge of dopamine. But this is not the neurotransmitter of joy. It is the neurotransmitter of seeking and anticipation. The more you rely on these external surges, the more frequently your brain downregulates its dopamine receptors. You literally become chemically less sensitive to pleasure. Jung saw this long before the fMRI scanner. He understood that when the ego, that part of you that believes it is the center of the universe, consumes too much external stimulation, it becomes bloated, suffering from what he termed inflation. Your current lack of joy is not a depression. It is the natural consequence of an inflated ego desperately trying to keep itself stimulated through a process of psychic expansion. When that expansion stops, when the novelty runs out, the ego deflates, leaving behind the residue of meaninglessness. The ego demands more, but the self, that totality of the conscious and unconscious, your psychological destiny, demands depth. In the early 20th century, Jung treated a man I will call Mr. Alistair. Alistair was a successful industrialist, a man who had secured every material symbol of success. Yet he arrived at Jung's door unable to find the will to get out of bed. He described his life as walking through a fog of perpetual grey indifference. Jung did not treat him for depression, he treated him for soul starvation. Alistair's emotional energy, his libido in the Jungian sense, was not flowing outward into the world, but had been forced inward, creating a dense pressure cooker state. Every time he tried to connect with his children or his wife, he felt a crushing, silent critique. He was projecting his own immense, unused creative potential onto the banality of his surroundings, thereby draining it of all vitality. Jung called this the projection of the inner tyrant. You see this in your own life every time you encounter someone genuinely enthusiastic about a simple thing, a hobby, a new song, a passing idea, and your internal response is a cynical, dismissive observation. You are projecting the tyranny of your underutilized self onto the simple joys of the uninflated. The reason nothing brings you joy is because your collective unconscious, the inherited library of human experience, is now demanding a more profound, more difficult, and ultimately more personal challenge than your current life affords. You are experiencing the first agonizing stage of what I classify as the 3 signals of the unwanted ascent. The dissociative gaze. This is the feeling that you are watching your life from an inch behind your eyes. Your friends are talking, you are nodding, but you are not in the room. This is your mind, attempting a psychic retreat from a reality it perceives as too shallow to engage with. It's a natural adaptive defense mechanism, preventing your higher-order cognitive functions, your prefrontal cortex, from being wasted on tasks and conversations that hold no ultimate meaning for your individuation. This manifests as a perpetual, low-level release of cortisol, not from danger, but from boredom. The hyper-skeptical filter. This is your absolute immunity to marketing, platitudes, and the shallow optimism of modern self-help. When someone tells you to be positive or follow your dreams, you feel a cold wave of revulsion. Your shadow, that reservoir of everything you deny about yourself, has grown powerful enough to see through the illusion. It has become a psychic lie detector, and it is actively poisoning every simple, uncomplicated emotional experience because it senses a deeper truth is being ignored. You are, in essence, becoming a spiritual misanthrope. The Mirror Neuron Paradox. This is perhaps the most painful. You are surrounded by people who seem perfectly content, and instead of inspiring you, their happiness registers as a foreign, even irritating frequency. Your mirror neurons, the brain cells that fire when you observe an action, helping you imitate or empathize, are firing correctly, but your emotional regulation center is rejecting the input. Your brain is saying, "I understand the concept of joy, but I refuse to replicate this specific small version of it." This creates a feeling of intense, isolating disconnection. You are becoming a spectator of life rather than a participant, because your soul knows that participation in this form of life is now an act of regression. This psychic retreat, however agonizing, is the necessary chrysalis phase. You must first stop being nourished by the simple before you can develop an appetite for the profound. The lack of joy you feel is an involuntary initiation into a more complex mode of existence. It is the end of the pure eternus, the eternal child, who seeks instant, effortless gratification, and the difficult, demanding birth of the conscious adult who must create his or her own meaning. And this process requires you to confront the shadow mirror effect. The shadow mirror effect is the painful realization that the indifference you feel toward the world is merely a reflection of the indifference you hold toward your own unlived potential. Every time you dismiss a common joy, you are dismissing a part of your own shadow that yearns for authentic, uncompromised expression. Jung always maintained that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your current paralysis is the result of your conscious ego trying desperately to maintain its polished facade while the powerful energy of the unconscious shadow is demanding a creative and ethical reckoning. Let us return to Mr. Alistair. His cure did not come from finding a new hobby or even from a religious conversion. It came when Jung insisted he stop writing letters to his colleagues and start painting his nightmares. Jung forced Alistair to give form to the grotesque figures of greed, fear, and desire that were haunting his sleep. Figures that represented the rejected aspects of his successful persona. This act was not therapy, it was alchemical transformation. Jung described the psyche like an enclosed system. If energy is prevented from flowing outward into the world through meaningful action, it flows inward, becoming concentrated and toxic. Your lack of joy is therefore a massive reservoir of trapped psychic energy, the very substance of your future self that you are currently allowing to stagnate. So, how do you free this energy? How do you move beyond the hedonic ceiling effect and step into the difficult yet deeply satisfying territory of meaning? The path is not one of pleasure-seeking, but of suffering acceptance. Jung called this the process of individuation. You must now begin to apply the 4 protocols of de-inflation. 1. The discipline of the mundane, the animus anchor. The search for cosmic revolutionary joy is what keeps you trapped. The real psychological work happens not in the dramatic crisis, but in the relentless, simple adherence to the ordinary. This is the integration of the animus anchor, a grounding force that insists on reality over fantasy. When you feel the dissociative gaze taking over, you must anchor yourself with ritual. Not the ritual of escape, the phone, the screen, the substance, but the ritual of presence, the disciplined cleaning of a room, the methodical practice of an instrument, the rigorous following of a challenging recipe. These tasks are tedious to the inflated ego, but they are absolutely critical because they train your brain's attentional network, the prefrontal cortex, to sustain focus on low dopamine tasks. They teach the ego humility and create a psychic container strong enough to hold the vastness of the unconscious. By doing the boring things well, you stop projecting your lack of discipline onto the world. 2. The acceptance of the shadow burden, the moral contagion. You must stop blaming the world for its inadequacies. This is the hardest protocol. The things that most annoy and repel you in others, their vapidity, their greed, their unearned confidence, are almost always the exact qualities your own shadow holds. Jung knew that the external critique is simply an internal confession. You must accept what I call the moral contagion, the realization that you are exactly as broken and ignorant as the society you criticize. This acceptance is not passive resignation, it is the prerequisite for transformation. If you truly wish to be free from the flat, joyless world, you must integrate the shadow by finding the creative utility in its negative traits. Use your cynicism, the hyper-skeptical filter, not to mock but to ask deeper, more penetrating questions. Use your isolation not to retreat, but to undertake genuinely solitary and challenging intellectual work. 3. The recognition of inflation, the archetypal mirror. When you feel a sudden, intense burst of pride or superiority, or conversely a deep, overwhelming wave of self-pity or guilt, your ego is experiencing inflation. You are either momentarily identifying yourself as a hero or a victim. Both are archetypal projections that pull you out of reality. Your task is to identify the archetypal mirror. When the feeling of "I am the most unique, suffering, perceptive person in this room" surfaces, you must observe it dispassionately. You are not your feelings. You are the space in which the feelings occur. You must allow the immense consuming energy of the archetype, hero, victim, sage, to flow through you, not become you. This is the moment when the trapped psychic energy is released, not as a destructive outburst, but as an observational insight. This strengthens your observing ego, the small but crucial part of you that stands separate from the emotional noise. 4. The practice of creative betrayal, the anima resonance. Joy is the emotional reward for an authentic life, but authenticity is a continuous process of self-betrayal, betraying the person you were yesterday to become the person you are meant to be today. The anima resonance is the felt sense of deep personal meaning that comes from creative expression, art, writing, philosophy, or even simply reorganizing your life in a deeply personal, symbolic way. This is the feminine principle, anima, of the soul that demands beauty and connection. You must commit what I call the creative betrayal. Start doing the thing you secretly long to do, the thing that would horrify or bore your current social circle. This act immediately generates a potent internal sense of purpose. It bypasses the dopamine system entirely, drawing energy directly from the unconscious. Your lack of joy is the siren song of your unlived life. It is the shadow telling you that your current psychological structure is a comfortable but ultimately fatal prison. You must accept the immense, terrifying gift of your dissatisfaction. It is proof that you are ready for a reality that is more challenging, more demanding, and ultimately more real. Your current state is not a deficiency, it is a declaration of psychic maturity. You are standing on the precipice of a transition where the price of admission is the willingness to sacrifice your comfortable life for an authentic one. This is the work of integrating the shadow, of meeting the anima and animus, and forging a self capable of withstanding the truth. This difficult truth is the only source of enduring joy. Welcome to the process. See you in the next dimension.